How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to WWII Hobby Time. Today I'm making a diorama using this 1/35 scale Panther model kit. It came with 2 sets of instructions, only one of which I could read.
And here we will find true facts about the Panther.
I jumped to step 1 of the instructions, which is usually a good place to start, and then I got to work removing the pieces from their runners. Having a good pair of nippers for this definitely makes things easier. From my experience, Tamiya kits have always been a nice experience. I'm not a micro detail accuracy fiend by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm always pleasantly surprised with the level of detail that they squeeze into these kits. Now, if you are the type of person who works the night shift and you want to squeeze more detail into these things, it's definitely possible, but for a plebeian like me, this does just fine. I flipped the chassis over and found that it was sad about something. Not sure what, but maybe it was sad that my life was going to be a lot harder putting the running gear together because I didn't follow the instructions. Either way, eventually I did get all of the wheels on. I was able to flip that over and then begin assembly of the barrel and the turret. I did drill a hole down the barrel to make my life a little bit easier later, and I put together this hatch, which does open, or it should have been able to open. I think I dripped some plastic cement on there, so it did get stuck shut. After the turret, I made my way around the tank, gluing on all the external details. After the exterior of the tank was fully kitted out, it was time to move on to the tracks. Unlike last time I put treads on a tank, I did follow the instructions this time, and I assembled them how they're supposed to be, which was a lot easier than just gluing it and hoping for the best. I used a little pin vise to drill out some holes on the exhausts, and after that, the assembly was done. After the tank was together, it was time to move on to the base. I bought this brick pattern sheet from Tamiya, which was perfect for the diorama that I had in mind, although as you can see, it's a lot smaller than the base I was working with, so I needed to shrink that down. That's better. I peeled the paper off of some foam core and just used the foam, which I covered in Mod Podge, and then I laminated my brick pattern to that, which adhered very nicely to the paper backing. On either side of the street, I added a sidewalk using more of the foam core. I glued that down using some foam safe super glue. And then to get everything nice and clean on the sides, I ran it through my bandsaw. To be specific, I ran it through 4 times. Alright, now it's time to talk about the concept of the diorama. The idea here is to have a split diorama, meaning it's the same location just divided down the center by time. I marked the dividing line right down the middle of the base, which I transferred onto the tank as well. One side of the street is going to be in pretty much pristine condition at the beginning of the battle, while the other is going to be ripped apart by the combat. But before doing the wrecking of the ground, I decided to add a few more details to give it a little bit more life, including a manhole cover and a storm drain grate. Both of those were leftovers from a mini art trolley kit that I put together a couple months ago. Once those were in place, I threw down some tape to more clearly establish where I could not destroy past, and then I began adding the battle damage. I went back and forth between my Dremel and a little cone bit and an X-Acto blade, trying to recreate the type of damage that shells or explosives would have caused to a cobblestone street. Or a brick street. I'm actually not sure the difference between a cobblestone and a brick, but if somebody in the comments could tell me, that would be excellent. After the material had been removed, I went back with some detritus and some loose whole bricks and obliterated bricks made with pebbles and sand. I sealed that all down with isopropyl alcohol and watered down white glue, and that will take some time to dry, so in the meantime, let's jump over to the tank. I wanted the tank to be firing in one direction, and on the other side of the diorama, I wanted it to be on fire. So I prepared the wiring before jumping into the paint. On the damaged side of the tank, I drilled some little bullet holes, then I heated up a metal tool to give the tank its largest blast damage, at least that I did on camera. Maybe this was caused by a recoilless rifle or another tank. With those steps done, I could move on to the foot soldiers. These sets seem to me to be made years apart. The German soldiers have way more detail and fewer seam lines than the American soldiers. The American soldiers feel more like army men. Either way, after everyone was assembled, I got them on some painting handles, and a few hours had gone by at this point, so the glue had dried on the base. So I brought that back, and it was time to prime. After mostly covering the base with a black primer, I swapped that out with a brick red, which I painted all of the bricks with. While I had that in the airbrush, I went ahead and primed all of the minis the same color. And then I threw a black in on top of the red and gave the tank a coat of primer as well. And there really wasn't any ream or rise into that. I just happened to throw black in without rinsing the red and came up with this more rusty steel color as a base coat. After the primer, I loaded up a base coat of tan, and as I worked through this project, I tried to figure out when and where during World War II this could be, so I got my colors accurately, but I'm honestly not sure. I don't know what city would have been occupied by the Germans with red bricks in any kind of a good condition by the time the Americans got there. But, you know what, we're not worried about that. It's for the sake of storytelling and visual contrast that any of these decisions were made. After applying the tan to the tank and the street, I gave the tank its camo pattern. And again, someone out there may know the date and location of the conflict based on the way that I'm painting this tank. And if that's you, please let me know in the comments. Most of my World War II knowledge is based on memories from playing Medal of Honor on PlayStation 2. Speaking of which, what was your favorite Medal of Honor game? I'd have to say Rising Sun. After the tank, I painted the uniforms of the soldiers. The Germans got a cool green with gray pants, while the Americans got khaki pants and green shirts. I layered up the colors with the airbrush, going lighter and lighter toward the top to establish some nice highlights. At the end, I went back in with that brick red to establish the base color for the skin tone, which had been a little bit lost while painting the uniforms. And while most of these American soldiers are pretty chill, the guy second from the left there is definitely channeling some mob-related activity. Probably should have given him a Tommy gun. After those had all of the airbrushing, I set them aside and it was time to go back to the city street. I started by cleaning up the left side of the street one more time before breaking out the wet palette, which I loaded up with that original red brick color and a pale yellow. I mixed the two in somewhat of a gradient and then grabbed paint from anywhere in between to paint different bricks as I went, which gave me a randomness of brick color that all fell within the correct range. I did the same thing for the other side of the street, only I kept it a lot darker, and then I painted up the brick bits and masked off the clean side to protect it from the final step, which would set the two halves apart more distinctly. And that final step was to spray everything on the other side with a sepia wash to give it a little bit more warmth and imply that it had been covered in a layer of dust. I then delicately removed the tape so as not to pull up any of the paint, which I have a lot of experience with. Pulling up paint, that is. With a clear division between the halves of the diorama on the street, it was now time to transfer that division to the tank itself. I looked up exploded panthers on Google, and after clarifying that I was looking for panther tanks, many of the images were of burnt tanks that were completely blackened. But now that I'm thinking about it, it might have been because the photos were in black and white. I probably should have left some color on the other side. Oh well. It communicates the contrast that I was hoping it would, and I'm happy with that. After painting up all of the details on the tank, I moved back to the soldiers and painted in their details. I left the uniforms pretty much as is, but I touched up their hands and their faces, their pouches, and their weapons. With that done, we were ready to move on to the electronics. So I got out a little drill, which I upgraded to a bigger electric one. For the flaming effect, I'll be using these COB lights that flicker very realistically, like little fires. They'll be inside the tank, so the silicone will not be visible, but the flicker will. Once those had been soldered together and the connections had been insulated, I got that inside the tank and I ran the wires through the base and connected them to the battery housing. Off camera, I also soldered an LED filament to the end of the barrel, which will be the muzzle blast. I drilled another hole in the side of the diorama, which I put a switch into, Then I connected it all together and made sure that the circuit was working, which it was. Then I broke out a little styrene rod and this cool new rotary tool that my dad gifted me recently, which I used basically like a little lathe. I used my X-Acto knife like a little gouge to round off the end of the styrene rod to make it look like the round that was being fired from the tank. I painted that with a metallic gunmetal, then I wrapped the filament with a clear piece of heat shrink, which will allow me to glue things to it. To get a realistic flare from the muzzle, I made a small donut of polyester fiber fill, which I wrapped around the filament. Then I weaved in some other pieces using a tool that was given to me by the craftsman. And then finally, I melted down all of the loose fibers using a butane torch, very, very gently. To complete the look, I applied some black from the airbrush to the furthest parts of the cloud. And with that done, it was time to glue my little soldiers in place. And finally, the last thing to do was to paint the sides of the diorama with black 3.0. And after that, I called it good. Before moving on to my final shots, please take a moment to appreciate all of the art challenge submissions sent in by my patrons. Every month we do an art challenge over on Patreon, and last month, the theme that was voted on was land battles. A big thank you and great job to all the patrons who participated last month. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.